Got it.
All right. Well, today we're just going to begin our new The Heretics Review Show, or HRS for short. We thought this is Nick and Andrews, and we're just gonna shoot the breeze here and talk about stuff, review films and shows and whatever we like. So hopefully, people will get something out of this and have it be enjoyable for everyone. So the format today is going to be pretty free form. I guess I'll start with an intro to our first episode with my PowerPoint here, and then for about, 5 minutes, and then Andrews will take over from there, and then we'll just go back and forth. Andrews, do you have anything you wanted to say?
No, that sounds great. Let's do it.
All right, let's see here. I can figure out how to share the screen here. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see that.
Oh, wow.
And
that's impressive.
Yeah, my PowerPoint skills have gone up. I've actually figured out how to put a background to it. I've always just had
Most
blank
impressive.
white background, So there
But
we
you're
go.
not a Jedi yet.
Not yet. So we see here the Heretics Review Show, and we are the first episode here. And today we're just going to talk about something very popular going on right now in the world of film, which is Star Wars, the Book of Boba Fett. And this is going to be an overview of everything, Star Wars and Boba Fett. We'll do a deep dive later on in the next episode, perhaps, but there's a lot to talk about here, don't you think, Andrews? I mean, there's
Sure,
a lot.
absolutely.
I mean, we'll start at the 20,000 feet view, but I think that we can dive really deeply into not just the characters and the culture that is being presented, but also probably into the mind of the creators as well. But here we see here that this is a huge budget. I mean, $100 million for a TV show. That's just insane. Gone are the days of low budget, $1 million TV series. $100 million. That's just insane. I don't even know how much $100 million is, but I guess in the modern day of Amazon's, one and a half, almost $2 trillion company. $2 trillion company. Let me repeat that. I think you showed me a picture of what $1 trillion looks like, and and I couldn't count all of those squares in the grid. So, anyways, I think that's just interestingly enough, it's almost as much as the Mandalorian season 1, and we'll get into that probably later on, hopefully. But we can see here the main stars, or should be the main stars, anyways. There's Tamara Morrison and Ming-Na Wen. We know.
Yeah, it seems like we're missing one. Where's Pedro Pascal here?
Well, that's
His show, isn't it?
Yeah. Technically speaking, this should be their show here. But you're right. He did kind of cut him off there, in the middle of the series here, which is I think a travesty. But we'll probably get to that soon. We all know Ming-Na Wen from everywhere. She's been in everything. I remember her the first time when she was Chun-Li in the first Street Fighter movie with Jean-Claude Van Damme. So
yep, with Raul Julia as M. Bison.
That's right. That was a star-studded cast, but it didn't do so well.
Wasn't that actually Raul Julia's last movie?
You know what? I think you might be right. It's either that one or the Addams Family. I can't remember which one it was, but it was before he died of I think it was cancer or some kind.
Yeah.
And Tamora Morrison. I mean, this guy looks young forever. Right? He was the original,
Jango Fett.
Jango Fett, and look at him. He still looks like he could star as Jango Fett if he was still alive, you know. And of course, we'll be citing and reviewing reviewers. One of our favorites to look at is Rotten Tomatoes, but you know, there'll always be other reviewers that will probably criticize. You know, will criticize the critiquers. So, but here we see here that the Book of Boba Fett has a 81% average tomometer. And then, of course, an average audience score is 62%. Now, Rotten Tomatoes has always been confusing to me because I always thought that that was actually an audience score. You know, I always thought that was for the audience to rate these things, but for some reason, I guess the critics got in there, huh, and kind of like poisoned the pot, huh? Because I always thought Rotten Tomatoes was just for the audience.
You know, there's certainly been some instances where it's very questionable. You know, I think you get a better assessment from the audience score than you do the critics, because there's so many shows that the critics are just, you know, they're in la la land. It just doesn't make any sense. And the only sense it does make is that, and I'm not suggesting that they are directly, you know, being paid off or corrupt, but I think they work for, you know, they are paid, and the agencies they work for want to maintain good relationships with Disney, you know, so there's kind of a little bit of a fox in the hen house thing. Because it's difficult to understand, you know, you put this in perspective with some other, you know, highly reviewed shows, and it's almost impossible to understand where that comes from. You know, it's really out of the woods. I mean, the fact that this gets a positive review at all is hard to understand.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll probably be arguing back and forth regarding Rotten Tomatoes going forward. That's for sure. But it is an interesting, I guess, crowdsourcing website here for what people think about certain shows. But you do see here a big discrepancy here, which is, to me, it's amazing. It's like, you know, 62% is just above average, you know, and yet the critics are like, you know, gung ho about 81%. Anything above 75% to me, that's a pretty big encouragement for the show. But anyways, here we are, and of course, it's still fairly early into the series. I wonder how many people have seen it yet, but here it is. And then we've had many discussions, haven't we?
Yeah, I think that there's another side to this, which is that, oh my, yeah, this is us, isn't it? So which is that, you know, how much time are these critics really putting into this? Are they watching the whole thing? Are they watching just the first episode? Are they watching the whole series? Have they watched anything before? Are they familiar with Star Wars, you know, the universe at all? So I think that I'm glad I didn't write anything terribly crazy. You must have edited.
Oh yes, I made sure that there weren't any
all the F-bombs.
Yes. Made sure that there weren't any you know, sensitive issues being mentioned here. You know, we don't want to get demonetized on our first episode.
But you know, there's a whole different perspective coming from someone who perhaps is more familiar with the lore to someone who is not. Or how much are they getting into it? Or, you know, like, are they just gauging the first 5 minutes and the first 5 minutes look okay? And what are the criteria they're using? It's really super vague, and it could just be subjective where people see it differently. But I think that when you boil it down to how it compares, for example, to other offerings within the Star Wars universe, you see, you know, kind of a clear hierarchy. And it's not hard for people to sit there and go, okay, well, Empire Strikes Back is number one, and then New Hope is number two, and then, you know what I'm saying, and rank all of the different efforts. And where, you know, this of course would most easily be compared to the Mandalorian. And, you know, how did they rank the Mandalorian? You know, how close is this to the Mandalorian as far as, let me see, Rotten Tomatoes, Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Because obviously the Mandalorian is a better show.
That could be a point of contention there for a lot of people, actually.
So Mandalorian gets 93%, And Boba Fett gets 80, what was it? 81%.
81% so far. We
So,
saw that over time that the Mandalorian actually went down in that score. It used to be like a 99%, if you remember, and then now it's like 91. So I wonder how much longer it'll be 91 for. We also have to account also, I think, for the current events, and all of this stuff going on in society, and then people looking back, and I wonder if the Mandalorian went down a couple notches because of the whole thing that happened with the one of their female cast members. That
oh,
probably.
you mean Gina Carano, or is that her name?
Yeah. I wonder if it went down a little bit just because of that. People boycotting the show because she's in it.
Well, or because they fired her.
Or because they fired her. Yeah,
more likely because they fired her.
A lot of controversy surrounding the actors these days, not just the characters they portray, but the actors themselves. It's kind of like if Shakespeare were to do some of the shows today, he wouldn't be doing so well. So, but here, this is just a little bit of a deep dive, as we were discussing. Some of the things, some of the outlines of just the character background and all that stuff. And I just wanted to show a little bit of it, and probably over the next few episodes, we will touch upon this stuff. But I find it very interesting here that what is a Mandalorian? That was one of our first things. And so here's some of our outline and our thoughts. What is a Mandalorian? It's a very interesting thing, because we know that Boba Fett is a clone of a Mandalorian. And we know that Bo-Katan is a Mandalorian, right? And so I think one of the interesting things about our discussion is that it always kind of goes back to either Jesus or Godwin's law, right? So anyways, that's all I have, actually, and I'll stop sharing here and make you the presenter, so that I don't know if you have something to present or not, but and then I'll stop talking as well, and I'll let you take over for now and see what happens.
Well, okay. I was thinking about it, and at first I kind of relished their view into the Sand People. Him joining the Sand People and sort of becoming part of that group. But then, someone made that comparison with Dances with Wolves.
Yeah.
And, when you sit on that comparison with Dances with Wolves, it does kind of go to the same place that Dances with Wolves went to, which is to kind of strip away the agency of the indigenous people, and then make this complete outsider a savior of their people. Despite the fact that if you watch that, it's clear that the chieftain's wife is far more capable than he is. But she's the one that saves the train heist and all of that. He would never have succeeded without her. She trains him, but she doesn't really get her day. Right? They just kind of cast her aside. In the end, she's just in a pile, like, oh yeah, she just died. So
yeah.
And I didn't like that. I did not like that. I felt like it was, I think there's this tendency to kind of take space within the ideas behind indigenous people, but then ultimately they're a prop. So the Sand People were just a prop. They didn't give the Sand People their due. They use them as what's the term? The refrigerator. You've heard this term?
An appliance?
No. It's refrigerating. It's basically this trope where something tragic has to happen to a woman, so that to define the plot of the story. It's called I think it's called refrigerating. But in essence, that's what happens here is that, the Mandalorians go from being, not the Mandalorians, I'm sorry, the Sand People go from being a more fully fleshed out, all of that effort to flesh them out was just to use them as a prop, as a throwaway to motivate the, Boba Fett. Now he's got to go and take revenge and do all of this other stuff. And that's what puts him in this whole position. But it's kind of trite. It's disappointing. Because, I really liked where they were going in episode 2, because they did give them much more agency, despite the fact that he's training them. She, the chieftain's wife, is the one who makes it all work. So in that episode, Favreau doesn't really take away what the Sand People are doing. They are allowed to have their own competency, their own, he's not the savior in that. He helps, but it's not just him. And then they just completely throw that away. Like off screen. It's just, oh yeah, they're all dead.
Yeah, they're all dead. That's right.
No worries. It just happens.
Now, have we seen another Tuscan Raider since they died? I mean, were they the last ones?
That was it.
The whole civilization is just gone.
All done.
Wow, that's just terrible. Right?
And then they have him going and advocating on their behalf to the Pikes.
Yeah.
But that's not really true to the Star Wars lore, because I mean, that kind of goes to this idea that, well, he can advocate because he speaks Common or English or whatever. He can advocate because he's, a better communicator. But everyone in the Star Wars universe runs around speaking a different language. There's no reason Sand People can't go and make that exact same demand. So why is he going on their behalf? Why just him? Why alone? Again, why does he suddenly become all in charge of their business? I mean, they may like him and they may make him an honorary member of their tribe, but that doesn't mean that he now runs the place. So I feel like this was kind of the beginning of the end. It was the realization that they were simply using the Sand People as as motivation for, and it's really poor use anyway, because what does he really do? He just goes and he mows down the biker gang, and the biker gang dying doesn't really mean anything either. Like, none of that actually means anything. The biker gang aren't like some super evil. They're just, I mean, he takes out by himself the entire group in the bar, right?
Yeah.
They don't stand a chance against him. And that's just one guy. One guy takes them all out. Now then, the idea is that they come back through and kill all the Sand People. The Sand People are, what are they, caught by surprise? They don't even realize this is happening. This is their territory. This is their turf, and they're going to be caught by surprise like that.
Yeah.
That they're just completely, they don't have any guards. They don't have anyone watching. This just doesn't seem right. And I feel like,
any sense.
I feel like that's kind of where it started going wrong. I mean, it started going wrong even before that, because even when you go to the premise behind why is Boba Fett trying to become a ruler or politician, this is new for him. I mean, he's been a bounty hunter his whole life. He's just like the Mandalorian. But I can kind of tell you why. I can tell you why, because the people who said, let's do a Boba Fett show, said, well, hold on, wait. Isn't Boba Fett effectively exactly the same as the Mandalorian? Like a bounty hunter that's quiet and doesn't talk and runs around in Mandalorian armor and doesn't show his face. Isn't that who he is? And everyone's like, yeah. We can't just make a show that's exactly the same as our other show.
Yeah.
They got to do something different with this. Let's do something different. He's taken over Jabba the Hutt's palace. That's it.
Yeah.
He never wears his helmet. He talks a lot. It's like they have to go to these places so they can differentiate him from the Mandalorian.
Yeah. So that is a good segue. I mean, what is a Mandalorian, right? I mean, that's one of the biggest things, right? Is he a Mandalorian? Is he not?
Well, it's I had a philosophy professor who talked about what a chair was, and he invited people to define a chair. And anything you would say, chair has 4 legs. Well, what if it has 3 legs? What if it just has 1? Is it not a chair? Anything you would say could be countermanded. So that the essence was that a chair isn't defined by a specific criteria, but rather it is a kind of collective impression that it doesn't necessarily have to check every box, nor could you set up a checklist to say all chairs have these things. Because whatever you were to choose, it wouldn't necessarily be so. Like, for example, do you have to sit on a chair for it to be a chair? Well, what if the chair were 100 feet tall, and you couldn't sit on it because it's too big? That's still a chair, So that's what I mean by when it comes to ethnicity, what makes someone belong to a particular ethnic group isn't necessarily so cut and dry. You can't just, I don't think there's like a specific checklist to say, well, okay, born in the group. So for example, you mentioned Din Djarin, whether or not he's a Mandalorian. And the answer is, well, yes, because he was raised as a Mandalorian. He observes the culture and customs of the Mandalorian people. So, but he is not actually, from the planet Mandalore, but also then if we look at kind of the Star Wars lore, the Mandalorians aren't necessarily a race of people. They are human. They're not some other non-human species. They're humans who went to Mandalore a long time ago, apparently colonized the planet and started their own culture, their own way of living. So within that, Boba Fett is an unusual Mandalorian because he has no contact with other Mandalorians. But can you be a member of an ethnicity when you have no contact with other people within that ethnicity?
Well, that's an interesting thing that you say, ethnicity, because ethnicity is very much so genetics, right? I mean, ethnicity is based on somebody's, genetics, pretty much.
Are you familiar with
nationality? Is different.
Well, that I think there's exceptions to that, though. I don't think it's purely a genetic issue. It's a tricky one. A good example of this is a guy by the name of Johnny Clegg.
Okay.
Johnny Clegg was a singer in South Africa, and he made enemies with the apartheid government way back when, because he had a band that had both white and black members. He's a white South African, and he basically became extremely integrated with the Zulu culture. He can speak Zulu fluently. He can do Zulu dances. Other than his skin color, he could easily pass as a Zulu person. But to this point, he's still not ethnically Zulu, right? Despite the fact that he's completely familiar with all cultural aspects. And I imagine that this is true in many other cases too, where someone can come into a culture, become completely assimilated in that culture, speak the language, be fluent, know the cultural references, but then still not actually be a member of that ethnicity.
Yeah. I mean, we see it a lot. Like look at Tarzan, look at Judaism versus Jewish people versus Christians. And remember, the first Christians were pretty much mostly Jews. I mean, you're a Christian whether you're born into it or not, but are you a Jew unless you're born into it? Are you Jewish unless you're born into it? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but in the case of
Can a
Din
person
Djarin,
become Jewish?
but I think it is in your formation, because in the case of Din Djarin, he became a Mandalorian as a child.
Hmm.
So
So is that like a Mandalorian as in like the culture or a nationality? Or, I mean, it's a very interesting thing to me. Like, what is Mandalorian? Is it somebody who is born in Mandalore, or is somebody who is following a specific religion?
well, in this case, because he was taken by the Death Watch, they're exiled.
Hmm.
They're exiled Mandalorians. So
Yeah.
this is a case where, for example, imagine that, that if a child were adopted into the home of, I don't know, into a French home, right? But that child comes from, I don't know, India. So if an Indian child is adopted into a French home, grows up speaking French, grows up in the French culture, they are French.
Mhm.
That's it. It is because that ethnicity, that ethnic identity is the one they grew up with.
Hmm.
So in the case of Johnny Clegg grows up as a white South African and then later comes to embrace the Zulu culture. So his ethnicity is the one he grew up with, which is white South African. But if you actually are adopted into a culture, as Din Djarin was, that's the only culture he knows
Mhm.
from birth. Well, I mean, from a very early age, maybe not from birth, but young enough so that he's not going to remember much else.
Yeah.
It's a tricky business. That's what I mean. It's like, what is a chair? It's like, it's very difficult to say, you obviously don't have to be born in a specific place to be part of that culture. There's lots of people who were born other places or lived other places, and yet are part of a culture that they don't necessarily share in terms of birth. My sister, for example, was born in Singapore, but she's ethnically white. She's not ethnically Singaporean. So, my other sister was born in Guam,
Yeah.
but both of them are white.
Yeah.
So it's not just where you're born, but it's kind of like what you are brought up into. It's
Hmm.
interesting because it's like, I think this is something that is a very big topic when it comes to all kinds of indigenous peoples,
Yeah.
where, like there's been so many obstacles for those cultures, so many diasporas or other kinds of problems, that it's difficult to say, what does ethnicity mean? My cousin, his father is white, my uncle. His mother is Vietnamese. And he grows up with his Vietnamese grandparents in the house. But mostly does everything with, has very few Vietnamese friends, but does have some Vietnamese cousins, but most of his friends are white. So, you know what I'm saying? Straddling this bridge between the two
Yeah.
cultures.
So basically, I kind of get a sense that what you're saying then is there's a big difference between race and ethnicity. Whereas
Yeah,
ethnicity
they're
can be
very
a
hard to
cultural
define.
thing, and then race is actually a genetic thing. Whereas ethnicity could actually be a combination of everything. It doesn't necessarily have to be just race, but it could be a culture or like a way or a belief system.
Yeah, my kids are a really good example of this because their mother is Shona from Zimbabwe. So they're half Shona, half
Hmm.
white. But they're ethnically completely white, at least
Yeah.
Western. I mean, because we don't even have a lot of other African American influences around here. They don't spend a lot of time. All their friends are either Latino, because we live in Arizona, um, or they spend more time around their white family than they do their black, because their black family is in Australia, North Carolina, England, all kinds of
Yeah.
places that they don't really go. So I am the most dominant force, for their ethnicity, and they don't get a lot of the other side.
Yeah.
So it's something that, well, okay, so if they go forward and they say, well, I want to claim my Shona heritage, I want to claim my Shona ethnicity, that's a challenge for them because they haven't actually grown up in it. It's not fluent to them. There's all kinds of things, like if you've ever seen, I believe the movie is Inglourious Bastards with Brad Pitt.
Yes.
So there's a British spy who goes undercover as a Nazi officer.
Yeah.
Right. And he goes into a bar and he asks for drinks, for another round of drinks. And he holds up like 3, let's give us 3 more.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah,
just does it.
I
Like
remember
they immediately know he's a fraud, because
That's right.
that's not how they do it.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. So because of this itty bitty cultural reference, they immediately know that he is not German.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that he can speak German fluently, despite the fact that he looks the part, everything about him, because no German would ever do what he just did.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's so subtle.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I experienced that because, I was pretty much raised. I came over here to America since I was like a baby. I was raised American, and I'm pretty much American. And I realized that even though my parents and everybody in my family are Vietnamese in blood, I realized how American I was when I actually went to visit Vietnam, and people there knew I was, without me saying a word, knew I was not Vietnamese, is what they said. You're not Vietnamese. Where are you from? You must be from America. I'm like, what? So you're right. It is definitely not appearance that matters as much when it comes to something like that. But
yeah, so if going back to Din Djarin would have all of these references because he grew up with enough exposure to that so that he can fit in with the other Death Watch Mandalorians perfectly.
Yeah.
Right? He doesn't, everything that they do, he understands it at a deep level. Boba, on the other hand, although having a Mandalorian father, doesn't have any of these references.
Yeah.
So culturally, he is a person unto himself. He's just basically grown up in isolation. And he doesn't have those Mandalorian references. So if he sat down with another Mandalorian, he would stand out as a fraud, even though he did have a Mandalorian father, because he doesn't understand all of these things. And it's not just that he's taking his helmet off, because that's clearly a Death Watch thing. But him next to Bo-Katan growing up in the culture would have all of these cultural references, whereas Boba Fett would not.
Yeah.
He would have whatever he got from his father, but because he lost his father at a young age, that's not a lot.
Yeah. I hear you. Yeah, that's a very, very interesting thing, because, and to me, it's interesting that Star Wars Mandalorians, they picked these 3 very interesting characters. We have Din Djarin, who raised Death Watch, and of course he took off his helmet, which makes him no longer Death Watch.
No. That's a very difficult one to understand. That reference to the helmet is
in the last episode, that one head lady said, no, you got to go there and rebaptize yourself or something like that. And then we have Bo-Katan, right? We have Bo-Katan who is like, wasn't the Death Watch or whatever, and now she's just like totally against that whole thing, which I think it's going to be interesting to see where they hit that one. Is that going to be like another spin-off, or what is that going to be? Because I think it's going to be very interesting to see where they take that. And then we have Boba Fett. Who is he? What is he? And I think that that deserves a deeper dive in our next episode. But anyways, do you have something more to say about that, or?
Well, I think it's interesting, the helmet thing, because of course we both watched the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And that certainly was not true of Death Watch in the Clone Wars. I mean,
That's
Pre
right.
Vizsla, the founder of the Death Watch, pretty much never wore his helmet. Bo-Katan, while she was in the Death Watch, never wore her helmet, or rarely did.
Mhm.
So it's interesting how that perhaps has evolved, and if they're going to go into that, I don't know if they will. It seems like they kind of, to be honest, they might have fudged that a little bit in order to explain why they didn't want Pedro Pascal to take his helmet off. You know, because the
Yeah.
first thing people are like, you know, why aren't we seeing Pedro Pascal's face? And so
Yeah.
they're like, oh, well, that's because the Mandalorians never take their helmet off.
Yeah.
Like, really?
Well,
No.
I think the last episode or the previous episode before that, actually, that lady actually says something about when a Mandalorian can and cannot take the helmet off. So I can't remember word for word, but I do believe it's something like you can take your helmet off, but not in front of others.
Right, but that's
something
still
like
not
that.
so, because Pre
Yeah.
Vizsla obviously had his helmet
Um,
off most of the time
Yeah,
that
but
he
I
was
wonder if it
on
was in front
Clone
of
Wars.
others,
Yes, of course.
as in like non-Mandalorians, or others
Did you
as in
watch?
anybody else.
Did you watch that from
I did.
Clone
I
Wars?
kind of remember it. I mean, it would have to be, I'd have to rewatch the whole
Okay,
thing probably,
so
but
the shortcut is that Pre Vizsla and Bo-Katan, while they were in Death Watch, almost never wore their helmets in front of
okay,
like lots and lots of people,
okay.
lots and lots of people.
Like outside of Mandalore?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
everywhere. Pre
Well,
Vizsla pretty much. I don't think you. I'm not sure you ever saw him with his helmet on.
Well, then, then maybe you're right. Maybe they just fudged.
And he's the
They
one
try to
that
make an excuse.
that held the dark saber, right?
Yeah.
Before
Yeah,
Bo-Katan
that's
got
right.
it.
Now I remember. Yeah, that's right.
So Sabine Wren is the one that ended up, I think, getting it from Pre Vizsla.
Uh,
And then she gave it to Bo-Katan, which turned out to be a bad thing.
yeah, Bo-Katan's an interesting character. And I mean, she's got to have her own spin-off show, right? And she's got to have her own thing. I mean,
Well,
she's like with a whole group of people.
what is the actress's name? She's from Battlestar Galactica, Katie Sackhoff or something.
Yeah, I think it's something like that.
But yeah, she's really she's a great actress. You know, I loved her in Battlestar Galactica. So it would be nice to see her have a bigger role. I think that they're going to save her for Ahsoka, though.
Yeah.
I think that makes the most sense because she and Ahsoka actually have a history together. So I think that, and I think they want a bit of the like they can't really have just Ahsoka by herself. I think they need her to have some like companions. And so I think they are going to pair her up with Bo-Katan. You know, so you'll have a bit of female chemistry between Katie Sackhoff and Rosario Dawson.
Well, I think this is a pretty long episode, so I think we should cut it off and have a segue for our next episode. What do you think? Should we do a deep dive into the last episode of Boba Fett?
Yeah, I guess that's coming out this week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it stopped Boba Fett on episode 4, but we can do it.
Yeah, let's see what happens. All right, well, it's nice talking with you, and until we talk again, this is THRS, the Heretics, signing off.
All right.
All right.